Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 10 Part 37 based on novel. So let's start. Sandstorms so hot that it was as if they were made of lava, ice-cold knife-like wind blades, and icy snowstorms that would completely turn one's mental energy body into an ice statue. Lin Dong finally understood the meaning of purgatory after entering this place. In this place, he no longer had his formidable physical body and his majestic yuan power. Instead, all he had was his pathetic mental energy body. With his current mental energy body, any one of these trials in purgatory could easily kill him. However, after one entered this place, there was no turning back. Moreover, he was not qualified to make a decision. Therefore, all he could do was to persevere on. Otherwise, the only thing awaiting him would be death. This training was very cruel. Fortunately, this was within Lin Dong's expectations. There was no strength in this world that came for free. After all, if it was so easy to reach the symbol Grandmaster level, there wouldn't be so few of them in this world. In order to metamorphosize, it was natural that one had to experience endless pain. This was something that Lin Dong clearly knew since the beginning. Hail came pouring down from the sky like a thunderstorm. Meanwhile, the yellowish ground had already turned white. A cold chill, that was visible to the naked eye, permeated the entire place. In fact, even the air itself showed signs of crystallization. At a certain corner of this snowy land, a skinny figure was trembling while snowflakes fell around him. Currently, he was seated on the ground with a dark green glow undulated on his skin. His blood, muscles, and bones seemed to have been corroded by the chilly air. As snowflakes fell around him, bloody scars would appear each time they brushed against his body. However, no blood flowed out from those wounds and he looked just like a withered corpse. Below his disheveled black hair was a pair of black eyes which were devoid of any emotions. A lethargic aura was scattered around his body and he looked just like a dead person. Sharp blade-like snowflakes continued to brush past his body before bloody wounds continuously emerged. However, he did not budge at all. That shriveled corpse continued to sit quietly for an entire day. The snowflakes and hail, which drifted down from the sky, finally began to gradually weaken before they completely disappeared. After the snowflakes disappeared, the chill, which permeated the entire place, also began to dissipate a little at a time. As the chill slowly dissipated, a tinge of vitality which was hidden deep within his body began to gather in his black eyes, which were completely out of focus. After which, his body began to tremble violently. Clenching both his hands tightly, his nails pierced into his palms. After which, his wounds, which covered his entire body, gradually began to turn scarlet. Subsequently, blood spurted out from them just like a fountain. Immediately, he became a person completely covered with blood. The cry, which was being firmly suppressed in his throat, was low, deep and hoarse. It was like the sound of a dying beast, as it reverberated across the land. Currently, he was kneeling on the ground, with his head lowered to the ground, while he pounded his fists heavily against the ground. Previously, his body was corroded by that chilly air, causing him to lose all senses. Therefore, he felt nothing despite being slashed by countless sharp blade-like snowflakes. However, the most frightening thing was that this intense pain did not disappear. Instead, it was accumulating and it finally erupted after the cold air dissipated and he regained control of his body. Moreover, this intense pain which suddenly erupted could even cause a tough-minded individual to go mad. That painful low roar continued for an hour, before that figure finally stopped. After which, his body collapsed feebly onto the ground. In fact, he did not even have the strength to move his fingers. Damned. Purgatory. Half of Lin Dong's face was buried in the sand and he looked thin and pallid. Time in this place flows at a different rate compared to the outside world. However, Lin Dong had already spent 2 months in this place experiencing that abnormal torture. Each day was spent in endless agony. Moreover, he would genuinely feel the threat of death each time. Although he had frequently toed death in the past, that sensation was exceptionally prominent here. That was because Lin Dong's tightly guarded consciousness had nearly been lost amidst the terrifying pain, for more than 10 times. Once it was lost, his mental energy body would also vanish and he would no longer have the opportunity to return. The icy cold chill this time around is stronger than the previous one. While his body was gradually regaining its strength, Lin Dong's originally chaotic mind also recovered slightly. He could detect that the icy chill this time around was stronger than before. Clearly, the trials in this place were constantly changing and becoming stronger. Once his body failed to strengthen accordingly, he would end up failing to persevere on and would naturally suffer a terrible fate. In order to survive in this place, one must get used to its cruel tempo. The constant, intense feeling of danger also forced Lin Dong's current body to become much tougher after experiencing those frightening trials. The only thing that Lin Dong found comforting was that his current body was slowly becoming stronger. This was not his real body, but his mental energy body. In other words, his mental energy was gradually becoming stronger and he was slowly advancing towards the symbol Grandmaster level. Even though he was improving slowly, it still gave him a glimmer of hope. Lin Dong exhaled. Then, he lifted his head and looked at the boundless land. His eyes contained a steely determination, which could not be extinguished despite experiencing numerous hardships over the years. Therefore, he believed that one day, he would be able to face purgatory with a nonchalant expression on his face. Just you wait. Lin Dong clenched his teeth before he viciously looked at the sky and swore. After which, he struggled before he climbed up and walked miserably towards the horizon. That was because he knew that the next trial was coming soon. The longer Lin Dong stayed in purgatory, he began to vaguely feel that he was not the only one in this place. Moreover, this faint feeling told him that this person was likely the linchpin that would decide whether he could leave this place. After he swore, Lin Dong still had to suffer endless amounts of pain. Moreover, the crazy trials, which could drive one insane, came continuously and left Lin Dong with little time to catch his breath. At times, he would even forget how it felt like when his body was not in pain. The concept of time was rather blurry in purgatory. Moreover, time seems to flow at a different rate in this place compared to the outside world. The eternal illusion demon flowers might be peculiar, but they were indeed powerful. Initially, it was still possible for Lin Dong to estimate the time in his heart. However, as the intense pain experienced by his body grew day after day, he no longer paid any attention to it. All he could do was to focus all his strength in order to survive the various deadly trials that originated from purgatory. Time flowed by aimlessly. The torture each day continued without fail. Half a year, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. In the lonely purgatory, various trials took turns to arrive. That skinny figure, which seemed to have come from a great distance, gradually became stronger after he survived repeated threats of death. Lin Dong endured the pain and loneliness. He was just like a pupa in a cocoon, which was gradually gathering its strength. After it accumulated sufficient strength, it would break the cocoon and transform into a butterfly. It was still the same yellow desert. Meanwhile, there were dozens of incomparably huge sandstorms raging on crazily. Many huge sand whips, which looked like giants, were dancing while the sound of air being torn apart reverberated across this place in a deafening fashion. Upon closer inspection, it was possible to see the sand whips landing on the body of a person. After which, one could see a travel-weary figure, slowly walking out from between the sandstorms. Many huge sand whips carried a shocking force as they came whistling towards that person. After which, they heavily lashed against his body before a low and deep deafening sound followed. However, what left one bewildered was that this person would not budge even after receiving those vicious attacks. In fact, his slow footsteps continued to remain calm and orderly. Those cruel attacks, which seemed to have come from a giant, appeared exceptionally weak. That person finally stopped before he lifted his head. His eyes looked exceptionally deep and appeared just like a pair of mysterious black holes amongst the stars. Contained within his eyes was a sensation of loss. He simply stared at those huge giant-like sandstorms. Those sandstorms were several times more powerful compared to the ones he encountered when he first entered purgatory. However, they were unable to pose a threat to him now. How many years had it taken for him to attain this result? 5 years? Or 10 years? How many times had he endured this painful training that would nearly cause someone with his mental fortitude to collapse? He could no longer remember how much time had passed. All he knew was that these trials, which he was once extremely terrified of, seemed to have turned into an ordinary event. He had eventually become strong. Did I become stronger? Lin Dong lowered his head and looked at his pale long hands. At the beginning, his hands did not possess any strength. However, right now, Lin Dong seemingly smiled. After which, he slowly lifted his hands and pointed them at the huge sandstorms, before he gently clenched them. Bang! The raging storm came to a sudden halt before the rapidly rotating wind also stilled. It was as though a large hand was grabbing them out from nowhere. Boom boom. The storms finally burst apart, turning into a yellow fog that diffused over the place. Yellow sand was falling down around Lin Dong while he slowly exhaled. Currently, he could finally feel a vast and mighty, ocean-like energy within his body. That was the mental energy that he finally obtained after training for so many years. This mental energy appeared to be far stronger than before. It's about time that this training ends. Lin Dong slowly shut his eyes. A moment later, he suddenly opened them. A sharp murderous intent, which had been laying low for far too long, finally rose. Hence, it's time for you to show up. Lin Dong looked at the completely empty land before his low and deep voice echoed across the land. A yellow sand cloud seemed to cover the sky as it descended, obscuring one's sight. Lin Dong quietly stood within the yellow dust. His eyes penetrated through the sandy fog and focused on a certain spot. There was a sharpness which had not appeared for a long time, in the eyes under his black hair. No unusual ripples emerged in the area after Lin Dong's voice sounded. However, his expression did not change. He continued to stare unwavering at that certain empty spot. Since a long time ago, he had vaguely felt that there was some other existence in this lonely purgatory during his training. However, that feeling was previously extremely obscure. With the rise in his mental energy cultivation, that feeling had finally become clearer. That hidden existence appeared to be quite frightening. However, Lin Dong also understood that he needed to defeat that hidden guardian in order to leave this place. Otherwise, he would have to stay in this place forever until even his body completely decomposed. The trials here are already useless against me. Therefore, you should personally take action. Lin Dong lifted his head while excitement surged within his black eyes. This time, there was finally some response from the empty space. One could see layers of ripples appearing within the emptiness as the sandy fog in the air actually gathered towards a certain empty spot. A long while later, one could see the yellow sand that seemingly filled the sky transform into an incomparably giant face. The face was extremely blurry, and it was not possible to clearly see it. However, Lin Dong felt the pores all over his body instantly tighten for some unknown reason because of this unfamiliar face. At this moment, he could feel a buzzing sound, which had disappeared for a long time, being emitted from his body. That undulation? It was the devouring ancestral symbol and the thunderbolt ancestral symbol. The two great ancestral symbols inside his body had actually started to stir. Although Lin Dong was unable to control the two great ancestral symbols because he was within purgatory, he was still able to detect even this faint activity from them as their current wielder. What a dangerous feeling! Lin Dong's expression was grave as he muttered. His eyes stared intently at the giant yellow sand face in the sky. He could swear that no one had ever given him such an indescribable feeling of terror. Even the darkness master in the devil-suppressing prison could not compare. There is actually still someone who can build purgatory. That strange giant yellow sand face rippled while Lin Dong was feeling shocked in his heart. An ancient voice, which seemed to have existed since the beginning of the world, finally resounded across purgatory. The corners of Lin Dong's eyes twitched when heard this. The great shock in his heart caused him to involuntarily take a step back despite his current mental fortitude. After which, he slowly lifted his finger and pointed at the giant face as he spoke in a hoarse voice, You are the symbol ancestor. The only one since the ancient era who could utter such words and cause him to feel a fear that surpassed even that of the Darkness Master could be counted with a single hand. Moreover, the greatest possibility was naturally the one who had stood at the peak of this world, the legendary Symbol Ancestor. Symbol Ancestor? Ha ha, a name that I have not heard for a very long time. The giant yellow sand face rippled. Its sand eyes slowly shifted downwards and paused on Lin Dong. I am merely an imprint left behind when the Symbol Ancestor created purgatory. I will awaken as long as someone is able to construct purgatory. Of course, I am also the final guardian you have to beat in order to leave purgatory. As long as you are able to defeat me, you will be able to break out from purgatory. Beat you? Lin Dong's pupils contracted slightly. Although the thing before him was a mere imprint, it was still something that the person, who had once stood at the peak of this world, had left behind. Why? Are you afraid? I have witnessed your training in purgatory for over a decade. You do not appear to be someone who is easily frightened. The yellow sand rolled as the ancient voice once again sounded. Lin Dong deeply inhaled as the shock within his eyes slowly receded little by little. Regardless of who the person in front of him was, he would likely never be able to escape purgatory if he was afraid. Elder, please teach me. Lin Dong cupped his fists together and shouted with a serious expression. Since the giant face before his eyes was the final guardian, the only way for Lin Dong to leave was to beat him. Let me experience the results of your training after all these years. The yellow sand on the giant face surged. Soon after, the land began to shake violently. The ground collapsed and bright red lava spluttered out like a sea. In the short span of a dozen breaths, the desert had turned into a land of lava. Lin Dong flew into the air. He frowned a little as he looked down at the lava sea below, which was emitting an astonishing heat. This giant face seemed to be able to draw upon the power of purgatory. Each simple gesture of it possessed extremely terrifying power. Bang! The lava sea surged and churned. Soon after, lava pillars, which were tens of thousands of feet in size, suddenly shot out. They appeared like many giant bright red dragons. These huge dragons coiled and twisted in the sky while dark red light flashed on the lava that flowed on their bodies. Subsequently, the lava began to solidify, transforming their bodies into a crystal form that flickered with piercing light. The lava crystal dragons occupied the sky. Those bright red dragon eyes were locked onto Lin Dong. A terrifyingly high temperature was emitted from their bodies, causing even the surrounding space to show some signs of being distorted. Although these lava crystal dragons were still over tens of thousands of feet away, Lin Dong still felt that his entire body was burning hot as a searing pain spread across the surface of his body. These attacks were more difficult to deal with than the many trials that Lin Dong had experienced within purgatory all these years. It seemed that it was not going to be easy to pass this last test. Roar! The lava crystal dragons coiled in the sky. In the next moment, they let out a long roar towards the heavens and their huge bodies turned into flashes of bright red light which charged towards Lin Dong from all directions. Lin Dong's expression was extremely grave as he gazed upon the 18 large lava dragons that were whistling over. Soon after, his right hand slowly closed as a silver-white energy ripple quickly gathered within his palm. This was the mental energy that Lin Dong had obtained through this lengthy period of training. Scram! Lin Dong's eyes were cold as he threw a punch forward. Vast and mighty mental energy swept out like a flood at this moment, directly turning into a 10,000 feet large silver-white mental energy palm. This huge palm was very different from one that was formed with Yuan power. It appeared almost completely real. This ability to give substance to mental energy was a path that one must take in order to advance to the symbol Grandmaster level. At this level, one's mental energy was no longer as illusory and ethereal as before. It would no longer be weaker than Yuan power even in a head-on clash. Bang! The giant silver-white palm ruthlessly smashed onto a lava crystal dragon as an astonishing strength directly caused the crystals on the huge lava crystal dragon's body to shatter. A mournful roar immediately sounded. Bang bang! Lin Dong was merciless in his attacks. A thought passed through his mind and the giant silver-white palm transformed into many after-images. They landed on the same spot on the lava crystal dragon's huge body in an extremely rapid and fierce manner. Lava spouted from that lava crystal dragon's body like a fountain. However, the lava dragon was no ordinary attack. Even though it had been injured by Lin Dong's powerful mental energy attack and its crystal body had been shattered, it did not fall apart. This fortitude caused Lin Dong's grave expression to deepen. Bang! Moreover, while Lin Dong was busy fighting a lava crystal dragon, the other 17 had also come whistling towards him. Sharp and searing dragon claws tore through the sky. The frightening strength caused the space around Lin Dong to be completely shattered. Lin Dong watched the lava flow on the giant dragon claws that seemed to blot the sky as they rushed towards him and deeply inhaled a breath of air. In the next moment, the sharpness in those black eyes intensified. Silver-white mental energy directly spread from Lin Dong's body, forming a large silver-white bell around him. Clang clang! The huge dragon claws ruthlessly smashed onto the large silver-white bell. A clear and hurried chime resounded across the sky. In the face of the ferocious attacks of 17 lava crystal dragons, some cracks began to rapidly surface on the silver-white bell, and it quickly shattered in the next instant. A silver-white ray of light shot out the moment that silver-white large bell was shattered. This ray of light was just like lightning. In a flash, it appeared above the seriously damaged lava crystal dragon's head. After which, its appearance was revealed. It was Lin Dong. However, Lin Dong's entire body was now wrapped in silver-white armor while he held a silver-white sharp long spear in his hand. An extremely formidable undulation rippled from the tip of the spear. Kill! A low and deep voice, which was filled with the desire to kill, was emitted from the silver-white armor. The long spear in Lin Dong's hands instantly grew to 1,000 feet. After which, the spear was swung and a puff sound appeared as it penetrated the head of the lava crystal dragon. Roar! A mournful roar sounded as the lava crystal dragon frantically struggled. Finally, it had no choice but to explode. A ray of light containing vast and mighty energy whizzed out from the explosion and tunneled into Lin Dong's body. As this strange ray of light entered Lin Dong's body, the surging mental energy around him instantly rose by 10%. I see. Lin Dong was startled as he felt the mental energy within his body suddenly rise. Soon after, he heartily laughed at the sky. In the next instant, his body shot out like a bolt of silver lightning. The silver spear in his hand was like a dragon as it clashed violently with the other 17 lava crystal dragons. Bang bang bang! Spluttering lava filled the sky as a silver-white figure continued to be sent flying. Cracks appeared on his armor. However, his battle lust remained akin to a tiger's. Each time his long spear pierced forward, it would penetrate a lava crystal dragon and another strange ray of light would subsequently rush into his body like the spoils of battle. The bitter fight in the sky continued for half a day. Lin Dong's body was very unsteady as his long spear, which was covered with cracks, was pulled out from the body of the last lava crystal dragon. The final ray of strange light surged into Lin Dong's body at this moment. He could feel the vast and endless undulations within his body. However, his face was covered with a tired expression. Although Lin Dong's mental energy rose rapidly each time he killed a lava crystal dragon, the energy he exhausted was also extremely great. There is still one more. Lin Dong slowly lifted his head and looked towards the strange giant yellow sand face in the sky. After which, his eyes gently shut as both of his hands slowly spread outwards. Dazzling silver-white light emerged in wave-like fashion. Finally, it spread throughout the entire purgatory. Even if I fail, I will have died for a good cause. A mutter gently resounded within the place. After which, the silver light began to pull back. In the end, it turned into a seemingly real sky-supporting pillar and shot towards the mysterious giant yellow sand face. Desperation flooded the land. Black hallucination fragrance, which was as viscous as ink, was flowing within the cave. Meanwhile, there was a figure sitting quietly on a stone platform, which was enveloped by dense layers of hallucination fragrance. The warm light around his body was faintly visible and it completely purified the demonic aura within the hallucination fragrance that had invaded his body. Yang was standing beside the stone platform with his hands behind his back. Meanwhile, his eyes were focused on Lin Dong's body. Currently, there was a tinge of anxiety on his typically calm, emotionless face. It has been 3 months since Lin Dong entered purgatory. Yang knew that time flows differently in purgatory compared to the outside world. 3 months here was perhaps decades in purgatory. Although what entered purgatory was merely Lin Dong's mental energy body, he still vividly lived through every second that went by in purgatory. His physical body had merely stayed here for 3 months. However, his mental energy body had already lived through decades. Moreover, no one had any means to find out how Lin Dong was doing in purgatory. This was something that even the current Yang couldn't detect. After all, he was merely able to borrow the strength of the eternal illusion demon flowers to build purgatory, but he did not have the ability to control it. Whether Lin Dong could break out of the cocoon would ultimately depend on his own abilities. Just as Yang sighed secretly in his heart, his eyes suddenly became focused. That was because he heard buzzing noises coming from within Lin Dong's body. It was from the 2 great ancestral symbols. Silver-white mental energy surfaced from Lin Dong's body at this moment. His body, which had sat still for 3 months, trembled gently. Both his eyes were shut, but there was anxiety plastered all across his face. It seems like he was currently in a predicament. Mental energy seeping forth. Is he planning to break out of purgatory? When Yang saw this scene, he clenched his hands immediately. Since Lin Dong was able to reach this step, it indicated that he had came into contact with the final layer of purgatory. That was the most dangerous place, and if he failed, he would be severely wounded. In fact, even his mental energy body would break down. Silver-white mental energy spread from within Lin Dong's body like floodwaters. Currently, the might of his mental energy far exceeded that of before. In fact, even the viscous hallucination fragrance surrounding him was blown backwards. At this moment, Lin Dong had clearly unleashed his mental energy to its limits. However, judging by his expression, it seems like he was in a pretty bad state. It looks like the guardian left behind by the symbol ancestor was indeed extremely terrifying. Mental energy continued to circle around Lin Dong for an hour or so, before they finally began to turn dim in front of Yang's anxious eyes. Evidently, Lin Dong had exhausted his mental energy and he was beginning to fall into a disadvantage. Lin Dong, you must hang on. This is the final step. Yang clenched his hand and muttered to himself. However, things did not progress according to Yang's wishes. Instead, the brilliant silver-white mental energy surging around Lin Dong's body turned dim and began to retreat. Moreover, Yang knew that the moment Lin Dong's mental energy completely vanished, his mental energy body would also collapse. Yang had a tensed expression when he saw this scene. There was an unprecedented stern and solemn expression on his face. A long while later, he finally sighed bitterly. Was Lin Dong really going to fail? After Yang sighed, the final trace of silver-white mental energy turned dim before it vanished. Currently, the light surrounding Lin Dong's body had completely vanished. Instantly, it seemed as if Yang's face had aged rapidly as his eyes were filled with dark grayish despair. However, just as Yang's expression darkened, his mind was suddenly jolted. He felt bewildered as he stared at his own body. Since Lin Dong was the owner of the Ancestor Stone, once his mental energy body collapsed, Yang should disappear and return to the Ancestor Stone. However, why was he still standing here? Lin Dong is still alive? Yang's eyes were glimmering and his spirits were lifted immediately. Then, he lifted his head only to see that there were now 2 ancient symbols glimmering on the surface of Lin Dong's body. Those 2 symbols swiveled over his body, before they charged into the spot between his brows with a loud swoosh. A black lightning color gathered on Lin Dong's brows. After which, it began to rotate violently. Immediately, a small crack was directly ripped between Lin Dong's brows. Under that crack was a mysterious eye filled with endless black light and lightning glow. That crack slowly opened up, before that mysterious eye, which was glimmering with lightning glow and black light, slowly revealed itself. Bang! Immediately, an indescribable mental energy storm crazily erupted from within Lin Dong's body. After which, the black hallucination fragrance surrounding him was completely scattered. In fact, the entire cave began to tremble vigorously, and even the mountain walls, which were constructed from unique materials, began to crack. Is that the eye of the ancestral symbol? When Yang saw that mysterious eye between Lin Dong's brows, which was glimmering with lightning glow and black light, a tinge of shock flashed across his face. As the ancestor stone spirit, he naturally had a profound understanding of ancestral symbols. Thus, he knew that the eye of the ancestral symbol would only appear after the owner of the ancestral symbol forged an extremely close relationship with it. Since the beginning of time, only a few individuals managed to activate the eye of the ancestral symbol. Unexpectedly, Lin Dong was actually able to do so. Moreover, Lin Dong's eye of the ancestral symbol clearly possessed the strength of both the devouring ancestral symbol and the thunderbolt ancestral symbol. Therefore, it was undoubtedly a much more difficult feat to accomplish. The eye of the ancestral symbol merely appeared for a second, before it swiftly vanished. Finally, the crack disappeared before Lin Dong's brows returned to their original state. Bang! However, after the eye of the ancestral symbol disappeared, a resplendent silver-white light pillar suddenly shot out from within Lin Dong's body, before it penetrated the mountain wall above and broke free. A 10,000 feet large silver-white light pillar broke out from the heavenly cave and shot towards the clouds. This strange scene immediately attracted the attention of every powerful celestial demon Martin tribe member. They were all stunned when they saw that silver-white light pillar. Soon after, their expressions gradually turned grave. That was because they could sense a vast and mighty, ocean-like mental energy within. That mental energy could even strike fear in the hearts of powerful samsara stage experts. This mental energy. Someone has actually broken into the symbol Grandmaster level? Truly amazing. His mental energy cultivation has actually reached that level? However, amongst the experts from our tribe who are currently undergoing a seclusion in the heavenly cave, it doesn't seem like there is anyone who possesses such formidable mental energy. Standing beside the heavenly cave, several guards were stunned when they saw this scene. Subsequently, they voiced their doubts. It's Lin Dong. The tribe leader of the celestial demon Martin tribe slowly said. Currently, he was also stunned by this fact. Clearly, he did not expect that Lin Dong's mental energy cultivation would actually reach the symbol Grandmaster level within merely 3 months. Truly impressive. First Elder Zhu Li, who was constantly standing guard here, involuntarily praised. Although he was a peak samsara stage expert who had touched reincarnation, his mental energy cultivation was far beneath Lin Dong's. In fact, he had also practiced mental energy before he ultimately gave up. That was because he knew just how difficult it was to reach the symbol Grandmaster level. He has finally reached that level. Little Martin sighed somewhat emotionally. That ignorant youth, who first came into contact with mental energy at Qingyang Town, had finally entered the realm of master practitioners in this discipline. The silver-white light pillar spread across the sky. Amidst that warm white light, Lin Dong's senses also began to spread. Although his physical body was still within the heavenly cave, his mental energy had become his sense of sight and touch, allowing him to absorb everything in this place into his sight. He was able to detect several powerful auras surging from various parts of the celestial demon Martin tribe. Meanwhile, there were also a couple of frightening auras located in some hidden spots. In fact, their auras were not inferior to that of First Elder Zhu Li. Lin Dong's heart suddenly jolted as his mental energy spread. Then, his eyes gathered towards the dark heavenly cave. That was because he could detect an extremely frightening aura from within. In fact, that aura was even more powerful than that of the celestial demon Martin tribe leader. Is that the person who has secluded himself at the deepest part of the heavenly cave? Silver-white light spread before it seemingly agglomerated into a person. After which, the eye of the ancestral symbol slowly appeared between Lin Dong's brows. Immediately, to that eye, the darkness within the heavenly cave was non-existent. As if it had penetrated through space, that eye stared right at the cave, which was located at the deepest part of the heavenly cave. In that cave, Lin Dong saw a withered figure who looked just like a skeleton. That figure had disheveled white hair which covered the entire cave. An exceptionally ancient scent was emitted from his body, giving a rustic scent to his surroundings. When Lin Dong peeked into that cave, that seemingly rotten withered figure suddenly opened his eyes, which seemed to have been shut for more than 1,000 years. His eyes were filled with a unique bright silver luster. The eye of the ancestral symbol? His silver eyes looked at the empty space, before a tinge of shock flashed across them. Soon after, he glanced at the empty space quizzically before he waved his sleeves. After which, the empty space actually began to crack, before he directly stopped Lin Dong from peeping. In the distant sky, Lin Dong's body shook after his sight was cut off. He could detect a somewhat familiar ripple from that person, who had silver eyes. Clearly, he was an extremely powerful and unfathomable individual. One can only wonder where he came from. Is this the symbol Grandmaster level? Lin Dong gradually recovered his senses. As he bathed in the unique sensation of being able to snoop on the entire world, he slowly spread his hands. At this moment, he felt as if he had merged with this part of the world. In fact, with just a single thought, he could unleash a frightening and destructive force in this part of the world. Lin Dong immersed himself in this wonderful sensation. In his absent-minded state, his mental energy began to drift into the horizon. Moments later, the empty space suddenly contorted, before a trace of mental energy penetrated through space and arrived at a foreign land. It was an ancient barren plains. At the end of this barren plains, stood a black palace. After which, one could see a black figure seated at the deepest part of that palace. That figure suddenly lifted his head. Black holes were rotating within his eyes and it looked like they had devoured the world. This scene came to a sudden stop. Lin Dong's mind regained its focus, before his heartbeat involuntarily increased. He knew, the barren plains and ancient palace that he just saw, was perhaps related to something that the nine-tailed fox had mentioned before. Devouring Divine Palace. That black figure should be the Devouring Master. This video will end here.